The biggest screen in Sterling Motors had been installed to show off $100,000 cars. On the last Friday of the month, it showed something no one in that glass palace was ready to see. A single leaderboard, 60 days of numbers, and at the very top, in letters 4 feet tall, a name that half the showroom had spent those 60 days laughing at: Walter Doyle. Brad Kessler, reigning salesman of the year, mirrored sunglasses pushed up into his gelled hair, a watch on his wrist worth more than most of the used cars out back, stared at that screen the way a man stares at a wave he can't outrun. His own name sat below the old man's, not by a little, by a canyon. At the center of the floor stood the old man himself, in the same threadbare corduroy coat he'd worn every single day, a coat Brad had called a Thrift-Store reject on the morning they met. Walter Doyle wasn't gloating. He wasn't even smiling. He was holding a small, dog-eared notebook in both hands, and he was looking at Brad with something that wasn't triumph at all. It was pity. The regional director had a microphone in her hand and a folder under her arm, and the folder was about to end Brad Kessler's career. A young trainee named Naya, the one Brad had tried to have fired, was standing off to the side with tears running down her face, and for the first time in 2 months, they were the good kind. To understand how a man everyone wrote off as a broke old nobody outsold the best closer in the state, from the worst corner of the lot, with the worst cars, wearing the worst coat, and took down a fraud that had been hiding in plain sight for years, we have to go back 60 days to a rainy Monday morning, and the first cruel thing Brad Kessler ever said to him. It was raining the morning Walter Doyle walked back into the car business after 12 years away, and he almost didn't go in.
He sat in the cab of a 2003 pickup with 240,000 miles on it, in the far corner of the Sterling Motors employee lot, watching the water sheet down the windshield, and he let himself be afraid for exactly 1 minute. He was 67 years old. His hands weren't as steady as they used to be. The last time he'd sold a car, flip phones were new, and the showroom he'd worked in had a coffee machine that took quarters. Everything about this place, the wall of glass, the espresso bar, the salesman in slim suits thumbing at tablets, belonged to a world that had moved on without asking his permission. But in the passenger seat was a folder, and in the folder was the reason he'd come. A hospital statement, Ruth's name at the top. His wife of 41 years had a kind of Parkinson's that didn't wait for anybody, and the in-home care that let her stay in their house instead of a facility cost more per month than Walter's entire pension. The job he was about to walk into came with something his pension didn't: group health insurance that kicked in after 90 days. Walter Doyle didn't need to be salesman of the year. He needed 90 days and a paycheck, and a plan that kept Ruth in her own bed, by her own window, with her own garden to look at. So he checked his tie in the mirror. An old tie, a good one, the corduroy coat over it, because his one suit jacket had finally worn through at the elbows, and there hadn't been money to replace it. And he went in. The first person to speak to him was the first person to write him off. Brad Kessler came around the espresso bar with his hands up like he was stopping traffic, a grin on his face that had nothing warm in it. He looked Walter up and down, the coat, the rain-spotted shoes, the old man's careful posture, and turned to make sure the other salesmen were watching. They were. They always watched Brad. Sir, the bus stops back that way, okay? This isn't a thrift store. We don't do handouts, and we definitely don't do..." He waved a hand at the coat. "Whatever this is." A couple of the younger salesmen laughed. One of them, a kid named Tyler who followed Brad around like a duckling, laughed the loudest. Walter didn't flinch. He'd been in rooms harder than this one. "I have a 9 o'clock with the general manager," he said mildly. "Doyle, Walter Doyle. I'm starting today." Something flickered across Brad's face. Not embarrassment, Brad didn't do embarrassment, but recalculation. Then the grin came back, wider. Oh, you're the charity hire. He said it loud enough for the floor. Corporate's little diversity of age thing. Right. They told us we were getting a, he made air quotes, experienced closer. He looked Walter over one more time and laughed. Buddy, no offense, but the last car you probably sold had a tape deck. This is a luxury European showroom. People come here to feel rich. You're going to scare them back into their Buicks. Could be, Walter said pleasantly, and walked past him toward the manager's office, which was somehow worse than if he'd argued. The general manager was gone, pulled into a corporate call, so Walter was handed off to the floor manager, a heavyset man named Rex Dumphy, who wore a headset he never used and treated the sales floor like a personal fiefdom he rented out to Brad. Rex barely looked up from his monitor.
Doyle, yeah. He slid a clipboard across the desk without making eye contact. Corporate's got some new bee in their bonnet. New ownership group bought all 4 Sterling stores, and they're running a 60-day performance trial across the whole region. Everybody's numbers on one board. Net sales, and this customer satisfaction score they're all hot about. They call it CSI. Top performers get recognized at the regional thing. Bottom guy at each store, he drew a finger across his throat, gets cut. Walter nodded slowly. 60 days. He'd wanted 90. And my territory? Rex finally smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile, because Rex had already had a conversation with Brad about the Thrift-Store coat. Funny you should ask. He pointed out the window, past the gleaming glass showroom, past the front row of 6-figure flagships under their spotlights, all the way to the back, to a chain-link corner where the pavement cracked and the good lighting gave out. Corner lot. That's you. The corner lot was where cars went to be forgotten. Aging trade-ins, high-mileage leftovers. The stuff the marquee salesman wouldn't waste a Saturday on because the commission was pennies and the customers were, in Brad's words, tire kickers and bus people. And parked dead center in that corner, under a film of 2 years' worth of pollen and rain spots, sat a car that had become a running joke at Sterling Motors. A silver flagship sedan, top of the line, loaded with every option, that had sat unsold for 26 months. 4 salesmen had failed to move it. Brad had nicknamed it the Anchor. "Sell what you can out there, Grandpa," Rex said, turning back to his screen. "And hey, you move the Anchor, I'll buy you a new coat myself."
Walter looked out at the corner lot for a long moment. Where Rex saw junk, Walter saw something else. He saw a dozen honest cars that would be perfect for the exact kind of customer this glass palace sneered at. People who needed a good, safe vehicle and a straight answer instead of a light show. And he saw the Anchor, and something in the old man's chest went quiet and certain, the way it used to, decades ago, when he was the best in the state, and nobody had needed to tell him so because the numbers already had. "That'll do," he said. "Thank you." The one person who was kind to him that first morning was the one person with the least power to be. Her name was Nia Okafor. She was 23, 3 weeks into a sales trainee program, the daughter of a nurse and a bus mechanic, and she was so nervous she introduced herself to Walter twice. She'd overheard Brad's thrift store crack from across the floor, and it had made her feel sick because she knew exactly what it was to walk into a room like this and watch people decide what you were worth by looking at your shoes. On her own break, she carried 2 coffees out to the corner lot in the rain and handed one to the old man. "They didn't even give you an umbrella for out here," she said, embarrassed on the company's behalf. "There's supposed to be a golf umbrella in the kiosk. I'll find you one." Walter took the coffee with both hands, the way you take something you're genuinely grateful for. "What's your name?" "Mia. I'm a trainee. I'm probably going to be terrible at this." Walter studied her for a second. The way she'd looked each customer in the eye that morning, even when Brad talked over her. The way she'd walked a confused older couple all the way to the service desk instead of just pointing. "No," he said. "You're going to be very good at this." He nodded back toward the showroom, toward Brad holding court at the espresso bar. That in there, the watch, the sunglasses, the noise, none of that sells a car. It sells the salesman. There's a difference, and the difference is the whole job. You already know it. Nia laughed, surprised. You sound like you've done this before. A while ago, Walter said, and left it there. He didn't tell her that 12 years earlier, his name had been in the training manual the company still used, that a young Rex Dunphy had once sat in a folding chair and taken notes while Walter Doyle taught a seminar on how to sell a car by refusing to sell anybody the wrong one. He didn't tell her that he'd walked away from all of it at the top the week Ruth's hands first started to shake and had never once regretted it. He didn't tell her any of that because a man who needs people to know how good he used to be has already stopped being good. He just drank his coffee in the rain and looked at the anchor and started, quietly, to plan. What none of them knew, not Brad, not Rex, not Tyler, not even kind young Nia, was that the shabby old man they'd stuck in the worst corner of the lot was about to do the one thing that money and noise and a $40,000 watch could never do. He was going to tell the truth to every single person who walked up to him. And in a business built on everything but the truth, that was going to turn out to be the most dangerous thing anyone at Sterling Motors had done in years. He had 60 days. Ruth had her window and her garden, and the rain, for the moment, was starting to let up. That evening, Walter drove the old pickup home through the last of the rain to a small house at the end of a quiet street where a single lamp was on in the front room. Ruth was in her chair by the window, a blanket over her knees, watching the garden go silver in the wet dusk. Her hands moved on their own now, a soft, constant tremor she could no longer still. But her eyes found him the moment he came through the door, and they were as clear and as sharp as the day he married her 41 years ago. "Well?" she asked. Her voice came slow and careful. "Did they give the old man a desk?" "They gave me a chain-link corner and a car nobody's been able to sell in 2 years," Walter said, hanging up the corduroy coat. He knelt by her chair and took her trembling hands in his steady ones. "And a boy in mirrored sunglasses called me a Thrift-Store reject in front of the whole floor." Ruth studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Good," she said. "You always did your best work when somebody underestimated you." She squeezed his hands, once, hard. 90 days, Walter. Just get us to 90 days. 90 days, he promised. He didn't tell her how tired he was, or how much the world had changed while they weren't looking, or that a part of him had almost turned the truck around that morning. He just sat with her by the window until the garden went dark. Because that was the whole reason he had walked back through those glass doors in the first place. Not pride, not a scoreboard, just this. A lamp, a window, a garden, and 41 years he was not willing to lose to a hospital bill. Everything he was about to do at Sterling Motors, he would do for the woman in that chair. To understand Brad Kessler, you had to understand that he had never once, in his entire career, sold a car to someone who couldn't obviously afford it, and he thought that made him smart.
Brad's whole method was a filter. He stood at the front of the glass showroom like a bouncer, sized up everyone who walked in by their shoes and their watch and their car in the lot, and he lavished all his charm on the ones who glittered and waved off the ones who didn't. When a glittering customer bought, Brad took full credit. He was loud, he was confident, he closed the easy ones fast. And for 3 years running, the store's crude old scoreboard had rewarded exactly that. He genuinely believed he was the best salesman in the state. He had a plaque that said so. And for the first 2 weeks of the trial, he treated Walter Doyle like a mascot. It started the morning Walter sold his first car, a 4-year-old wagon with high mileage, to a home health aide who needed something reliable for a long commute and a tight budget. Walter spent an hour with her. He didn't upsell her a thing. He steered her away from a flashier model she'd asked about because the repair history was ugly,
ran the numbers honestly, and sent her home in exactly the right car for $400 under what she'd braced to spend. Brad watched the whole thing from the espresso bar and nearly cried laughing. "He spent an hour," Brad announced to the floor, "and lost the store money to sell a station wagon to a lady who cleans houses. That's not a salesman, boys. That's a volunteer." He clapped Tyler on the shoulder. "Watch and learn what not to do." What Brad didn't see, what Brad was constitutionally incapable of seeing, was what happened next. The home health aide told her sister. Her sister told 2 coworkers. By the end of the week, 3 people had driven across town and asked by name for the older gentleman on the corner lot who tells you the truth. Walter sold 2 of them cars. His CSI score, the customer satisfaction number the new owners cared about so much, came back at a perfect 100. Twice.
On the big screen, quietly, in a corner nobody was looking at yet, the name Doyle started to climb. At first, the number moved so slowly that nobody noticed. In week 1, Doyle sat near the bottom of the scoreboard, 31st out of 34, a name in small gray type buried under the flashy leaders. But the new owner's system did not only measure the size of a sale, it measured the customers who came back, the ones who sent a friend, the satisfaction scores most salesmen treated as an afterthought. And on those columns, the old man on the corner lot was untouchable. By the end of week 2, he had climbed to 22nd. By week 3, to 15th. Every Monday, the board refreshed, and every Monday, the name Doyle had crawled a few rungs higher. Quiet, patient, relentless, like water finding its level. Brad noticed the morning it cracked the top 10. He was at the espresso bar, mid-story, and glanced up at the screen out of pure habit, and stopped talking in the middle of a word. He walked over. He stood in front of the board with his triple shot going cold in his hand, and read the name 3 times, as if staring might change it. Doyle. 9th. From the corner lot, with the beaters. He forced a laugh for the salesman watching him, but it came out thin. "He's padding it with junk sales," he told them. "Watch, it won't hold." It held. The next Monday, Doyle was 7th. The thing that truly ate at Brad, the thing he could never quite put into words, was that he could not see how the old man was doing it. There was no trick. There was no gimmick. Walter Doyle simply kept doing the same unglamorous thing over and over with every single person who wandered onto his cracked patch of pavement, until it added up to a number Brad's entire philosophy insisted should have been impossible.
The morning of that 7th place Monday, a young man with a fresh military haircut walked onto the corner lot, a duffel still in the back of his cab, newly separated from the Marines and braced to be taken for a fool on his first big civilian purchase. He had read online that dealerships smelled fear on young service members and ate them alive, and he had come in ready for a fight. What he got instead was an old man in a corduroy coat who shook his hand, thanked him for his service without making a performance of it, and then spent 40 minutes talking him out of the flashy coupe he thought he was supposed to want, and into a plain, indestructible sedan that would survive a decade and cost him a third less. Walter ran the honest numbers. He showed the kid exactly where a finance office would try to pad the loan, and taught him, right there on the pavement, how to read the one line on a contract that separates a fair deal from a trap. "Why are you telling me all this?" the young man asked. "You'd make more if I bought the other one." "I'd make 1 commission," Walter agreed, "and lose a customer. In a year, you'd realize I saw you coming, and you'd never send me a soul." He handed over the keys. "I don't sell 1 car, son. I sell the next 20 to everyone you're going to tell about today. That math only works if I tell you the truth."
The Marine bought the sedan, and then he did the exact thing Walter had quietly bet every honest customer would do. He told everyone. A single mother whose transmission had finally died came in dreading a predator
and left an hour later in a safe used crossover at a price that actually let her sleep at night, and she told the entire staff of the diner where she worked. None of them were glamorous sales. Every one of them came back and brought others. The perfect column of hundreds beside Doyle's name grew one honest row at a time, and on the board, the name climbed to fourth. Brad escalated, the way his kind always does when reality stops cooperating. First, it was the small humiliations. He had Rex lose Walter's leads in the computer. He parked his own car across 2 spaces in front of the corner lot so customers couldn't find the entrance. He told walk-ins who asked for Walter that the old guy's not really staff. He's more of a, and here he'd tap his temple, community outreach situation. Let me get you a real product specialist. Once, in front of a customer, he pretended he thought Walter was the lot porter and told him to go move a car and wash it. Walter moved the car. He did not wash it. He came back, quietly reintroduced himself to the customer as their salesman, and sold them a certified SUV 40 minutes later while Brad watched through the glass. That one stung, so Brad found a crueler lever. He found Naya. He noticed the trainee kept drifting out to the corner lot, bringing Walter customers she didn't think she could handle yet, watching how he talked to them, taking notes in a little notebook of her own because Walter had told her to. To Brad, this was 2 nobodies conspiring in the corner, and it offended him. So he started working on Naya the way a bully works on the smallest kid in the yard.
Brad told her, cornering her by the printer. Corporate stuck 'em here to fail, so they've got a body to cut at the end. You keep hanging around the corner lot, you're gonna get cut right along with him. You want a career? You learn from me. You want to hand out coffee and feelings? He smiled. Mia went back to her desk shaking. That afternoon, she didn't go out to the corner. Walter noticed, and he understood exactly what had happened, and he didn't say a word about it. He just made a point the next morning of walking into the glass showroom in his thrift-store coat, straight up to Nia's desk in front of everyone, and asking her, loudly, warmly, like she was the most important colleague he had, for her professional opinion on a trade-in appraisal. He deferred to her. He wrote down what she said. He thanked her by name. He gave a terrified 23-year-old back her spine in 90 seconds. And he did it in Brad Kessler's own throne room. And Brad hated him for it more than for anything else he'd done yet. So Brad reached for the one lever he still controlled. He went to Rex, and 2 days later, a flatbed quietly pulled up to the corner lot and hauled away its 6 best cars, the cleanest trade-ins, the ones with real demand, reassigned to the front line per inventory strategy. In their place, Rex sent out the true bottom of the barrel, a dented minivan with a salvage brand, a sedan with a check engine light nobody had bothered to chase down, 2 high-mileage orphans that had already failed to sell at auction. It was designed to strangle the old man's numbers at the root. If Walter had nothing decent to sell, the board would take care of the rest.
Walter walked the new row of junk the next morning with his coffee, unhurried, reading each windshield. He didn't complain to Rex. He didn't say a word to anyone. He simply pulled the service records on every one of the sad cars they dumped on him, spent 3 lunch breaks under their hoods with Gus the detailer, and learned them down to the bolt. Which flaws were real and which were cosmetic, what each one was honestly worth, and exactly the kind of person each one was secretly perfect for. The check engine sedan needed a $40 sensor. The salvage minivan had been branded over cosmetic hail damage and was mechanically flawless, an unbeatable bargain for the right big family, if a person were simply willing to explain the truth instead of hide it. They had tried to bury him under the worst cars on the lot. Instead, they had handed him a stack of honest bargains nobody else had bothered to understand. And honesty, on that corner, was the one product Walter Doyle never ran out of. By Friday, he had sold 3 of them. The board did not so much as flinch. Doyle kept climbing. Because here is the thing about the corner lot. At the end of week 3, Walter sold the anchor.
The silver flagship, the 26-month joke. A retired school teacher and her husband had wandered onto the corner lot almost by accident, apologizing for taking his time, sure they were in the wrong place. Walter didn't flinch at their modest clothes or their old car. He listened. He learned the husband had just gotten a diagnosis and that this was, quietly, meant to be the last nice thing they bought together. A comfortable car for long drives while they still could. Walter walked them to the anchor. He knew that car cold. He'd spent his lunch breaks going over every inch of it. And he knew why it hadn't sold. 4 salesmen had tried to move it with horsepower and status. And the people who wanted horsepower and status wanted this year's model, not a 2-year-old orphan. But for a couple who wanted to be comfortable and safe on long roads together, it was, honestly, close to perfect. He told them the truth about it, the good and the 2 small flaws, and he let them sit in it in the sunshine for 20 minutes without saying anything at all. They bought it, at full price, because he'd never once made them feel they had to haggle to be respected. When the sale posted, the whole showroom went quiet for a second. Rex actually stood up. Brad laughed it off. Broken clock, twice a day. But something had shifted in the room, and everybody felt it except him. Nia found Walter in the corner lot afterward and hugged him before she could stop herself. "Rex owes you a coat," she said, laughing and wiping her eyes. "Rex owes a lot of people a lot of things," Walter said. "Keep your notebook handy, Nia, and write this down. The customer is never the mark. The customer is the whole reason the door's open. The day you forget that, you turn into," he tipped his head toward the glass, "and you never sell another honest thing in your life." By the end of week 4, Doyle was in the top 3 on the board, and Brad Kessler had stopped laughing. He'd stopped laughing because his own numbers, for the first time in 3 years, were being looked at closely, and Brad had built his crown on things that did not survive a close look. He needed a way to bury the old man that had nothing to do with selling cars, because on the one field that actually mattered, the field of just being good at it, Brad was starting to understand he might lose. And a man like Brad Kessler, faced with losing fairly, will always go looking for a way to win dirty. He found it in the last place anyone should ever look for an advantage, in a car he knew was dangerous. Every dealership has cars in the back it doesn't talk about, and every honest one gets rid of them the right way. Sterling Motors had a sleek black coupe that had come in on a trade 3 months earlier, and Brad Kessler knew something about it that the buyer never would. It was a flood car. Walter had spotted it his second week. The faint tide line under the carpet, the corrosion starting on connectors that should have been clean, the too fresh smell of an interior that had been detailed hard to hide something. He'd quietly flagged it in the system with a note: suspected flood/salvage, recommend disclosure and wholesale, not retail. Doing the right thing. Someone had deleted his note within the hour. That someone was Rex, at Brad's request, because that black coupe was beautiful, and beautiful sells for a lot, and Brad had a number to hit. The midpoint of this story is the morning a young couple walked in with a baby. The Delgados. First real car for their growing family. A stretch, even at a good price. And they'd saved for 2 years. They fell in love with a black coupe on sight. And Brad Kessler, charming, confident, watch-flashing, sold it to them in under an hour. He told them it was a one-owner beauty. He looked a new mother in the eye, with her infant asleep against her chest, and he sold her a car he knew had sat underwater. A car whose brakes and airbags and electrical system could fail without warning, and he did it for a commission and a bump on the board. Nia was at the next desk. She heard Brad say one owner, clean history, and she remembered, because she'd started reading everything Walter flagged, that there had been a warning on that exact VIN, a warning that wasn't in the system anymore. She pulled the independent history report on her own screen while Brad was at the printer. Salvage auction. Flood state, total loss buyback, rebuilt,
and washed clean of its paper trail. Her hands went cold. She did the brave thing and the naive thing at the same time. She went straight to Brad, quietly, and said, "I think there's a problem with the coup's history. I think we need to tell them before they sign." Brad's face didn't change in front of the customers, but he walked her back to the hallway by the restrooms, out of sight, and the mask came off entirely.
"Let me explain how this works, sweetheart," he said, very low, very calm, one finger tapping her collarbone. "That car is sold. That's my number for the month. You say one word, one, to those people, and I will go to Rex and I will tell him you've been unstable, that you've been out in the corner lot all month with a senile old man cooking up complaints, and that you tried to blow up a clean deal out of jealousy. Who do you think they'd believe?" He straightened her collar like a threat. "You're already on the chopping block. Open your mouth, and I'll make sure you're the one who gets cut." And then he went back out, all smiles, and handed a pen to a young mother, and she signed. Nia stood frozen in the hallway. She was 23. She had 3 weeks of experience, a mountain of student loans, and a manager who just promised to end her before she started. She told herself maybe she was wrong. She told herself it wasn't her business. She watched through the glass as the Delgados buckled their baby into a car that should have been crushed for scrap and drove it off the lot into traffic. She made it to the corner lot before the tears came. Walter listened to the whole thing without interrupting, the coffee going cold in his hand. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, and the kindness in his face had gone very still, the way a river goes still right before the drop. "Nia," he said, "look at me. You are not going to lose your job over this. I promise you that." He counted them on his fingers, calm as anything. "First, do not confront him again. Not yet. Second, that history report you pulled, do not delete it. Print it. Print 2. He looked out at the traffic where the black coupe had disappeared. "Get me the Delgado's phone number off the paperwork, because there is a family driving a drowned car with a baby in the back seat. And before this is about the board or Brad or any of it, it is about getting them out of that thing safely. Everything else can wait." Nia wiped her face. "Why are you helping? You could just win. You're already winning. If they cut me, that's one less person ahead of you." Walter almost smiled. "Kid," he said, "that's the whole difference between me and him, and you just said it out loud without noticing. He asks what a person can do for him. I ask what's happening to them." He set down the cold coffee. "Now go get me that number. We've got a family to look after. The rest of it, Brad, Rex, the board, they'll dig their own graves. People like that always do. Our job is just to make sure we're not standing in the hole with them when they finish." The first call Walter Doyle made was not to a lawyer, or to corporate, or to a reporter. It was to the Delgados. He did it gently, off the clock, from his own ancient flip phone in the corner lot. He introduced himself as a salesman at Sterling and said there was a paperwork issue with the history on their coupe that he wanted to make right. No charge, no trouble for them, but he'd feel a lot better if they didn't drive it until he could confirm something. He was so calm and so kind that Mrs. Delgado, who had felt a small wrong note in the whole fast, flashy sale and hadn't been able to name it, trusted him instantly. They parked the car. That single phone call, made by a man with nothing to gain, may have been the most important thing anyone did in this entire story, because a rebuilt flood car's brakes do not care whose baby is in the back. Then, and only then, Walter started to build. He was not a man of the internet, but he was a man of paper, and paper, it turns out, is patient and hard to kill. Over the next 10 days, while his name kept climbing the board, Walter quietly assembled a folder of his own, the
twin of the one that would later end up under the regional director's arm. He had Nia's 2 printouts of the salvage history. He had the original disclosure note he'd entered in the system, because Walter, being who he was, had photographed his own screen the day he wrote it, an old habit from an old era when he'd learned that things you put in other people's computers have a way of vanishing. That photo had a timestamp. It proved the warning had existed and that someone had deleted it. He had the sales contract language Brad had used, one owner, clean history, in writing, initialed. And he had something Brad never imagined an old man in a bad coat would know how to get. He had the truth about the numbers.
Because here was the quiet thing Walter had understood since his first morning. The new owners hadn't put everyone on one transparent board as a motivational gimmick. They'd done it because they suspected one of their 4 stores was rotten, and they were watching. The CSI scores, the sales audits, the history report logins, all of it was being recorded now, in a system Rex didn't fully understand and Brad didn't know existed. Brad was standing in a house that had just had cameras installed, bragging about all the things he'd always gotten away with in the dark. And brag he did. That was the second thing that tightened the noose, and Brad tied it himself. Rattled by Walter's climb, Brad went on the offensive in the worst possible way, loudly and to the wrong audience. When the regional director, a sharp, unhurried woman named Diane Marsh, came through on a store visit, Brad cornered her at the espresso bar and performed. He bragged that his fleet account, a big recurring corporate deal that made up a huge chunk of his monthly numbers, was all him, locked up tight, untouchable. He bragged that the corner lot experiment was proof that you can't sell luxury to poor people, no matter how many station wagons the old man gives away. He bragged, laughing, that customer satisfaction scores were a participation trophy metric for salesmen who can't actually close. Diane Marsh smiled and thanked him and wrote nothing down, and remembered all of it. She had spent 2 weeks quietly pulling threads on that fleet account, and what she'd found was that Brad's untouchable deal was, in large part, a fiction. Units logged as sold that had never left the lot, commissions drawn on paper transactions that reversed the next quarter, a shell of a number he'd been inflating for 2 years with Rex's help to keep his crown and his bonus. The brag Brad thought made him look strong had just told the one person auditing him exactly where to dig. The emotional low point came on day 54. Rex called Walter into the little office, and on Brad's coaching, tried to end him on a technicality. Attendance, Rex said, not meeting his eyes, sliding a write-up across the desk. You've been leaving the floor. Personal calls. Unauthorized breaks. Corporate's real strict on it during the trial. 2 more of these, and you're gone before the 60 days are even up. No severance, no insurance, nothing. It was a lie, and both of them knew it. The personal calls were Walter checking on the Delgados and on Ruth's aide. But it was a lie with a signature line, and Walter was 10 days short of the 90-day mark when Ruth's insurance would begin. He drove home that night to the small house with the garden, and he sat on the edge of the bed and held Ruth's trembling hand, and for the first time, he let himself feel how tired he was. Ruth couldn't say much anymore, but she could see him, and she squeezed his hand once, hard, the way she used to when he was young and unsure and about to walk into a room that scared him. I know, he told her softly. I know. Just a few more days, love. I'm going to do it right. I'm not going to become one of them to beat them. There's no point winning that way. You taught me that. He kissed her hand. 10 more days. The next morning, an ally he hadn't asked for stepped up. Gus Marchetti had detailed cars at Sterling for 19 years, an invisible man in coveralls whom Brad had never once said good morning to. Doyle? Walt Doyle? I took your seminar in '09. He'd kept the old man's secret all month because Walter asked him to, but now Gus came to the corner lot with his own quiet contribution. He was the one who detailed the black coupe when it came in. He'd seen the waterline. He'd told Rex. And he was willing, nervous, but willing, to say so. On the record, in writing. "I should have made noise back then," Gus said. "I've got a family. I told myself it wasn't my fight. But you telling those Delgados the truth when you had nothing to gain, that shamed me, Walt. In a good way. Put me down." Walter shook his hand for a long time. By then, something had happened on the board that the whole store had stopped being able to ignore. On day 50, the name Doyle reached the very top. Number 1, highest net sales and a flawless satisfaction column, 50 days deep, from the worst desk in the building. Salesmen who had laughed at the thrift-store coat in week 1 now wandered out to the corner lot on their breaks to ask the old man how he did it. And Walter told them, plainly, because the secret had never been a secret. It was only ever a thing nobody had wanted to hear. A few of them started keeping notebooks of their own.
Brad stopped eating lunch on the floor. He could not stand to look at the screen. He took to standing in Rex's office, with the blinds half drawn, watching the old man through the glass. And the watching curdled into something worse than jealousy. Because somewhere underneath the bluster, Brad had finally understood the one thing he could never say out loud. That if the board was telling the truth, if patience and honesty and treating people like people were actually better at this job than everything he had built his life around, then he had wasted 15 years, and the only move he had left was to cheat. He hated Walter Doyle for making him know it. Nia saw the change in Brad, and it scared her more than his cruelty had. She found Walter locking the kiosk one evening and said so. He's not laughing anymore. That's worse. When men like that stop laughing, they do something stupid. Walter nodded slowly. Then we make sure that when he does, it happens on the record. He looked at her, really looked, the way he had that first rainy morning. You've changed, you know. 3 weeks ago, you couldn't say your own name twice without apologizing. Now you're reading a grown man like a service contract. He almost smiled. That wasn't me teaching you. That was always in there. The corner lot just gave it the room to stand up. The pieces were nearly all there. The salvage history, the time-stamped deleted warning, the detailer's statement, the contract with Brad's lie in ink, and a big transparent board controlled by people Brad had insulted to their faces that had been quietly recording the truth about who could actually do this job for 59 days straight.
On the eve of the final day, Brad Kessler was serene. He'd handled the old man with Rex's write-ups. He'd scared the trainee into silence. His inflated fleet number sat fat and happy near the top of the board. He walked the floor that evening like a king the night before a coronation. And when he passed the corner lot, where Walter was locking up the kiosk in the dark, he couldn't resist one last time. "Big day tomorrow, Pops," Brad said, grinning. "Regional directors coming in person to hand out the recognition and read the board. Enjoy your last shift. Nothing personal. It's just, this is a winner's business. And you're a nice guy business. Those don't pay." He patted the chain link fence. "Should have stayed on the bus." Walter finished locking the kiosk. Then he turned around, and for the first time all 60 days, he let Brad see just a flicker of the man he'd been. The one whose name was in the training manual. The one who'd forgotten more about this trade than Brad would ever learn. "You keep telling everyone this is a winner's business," Walter said quietly. "Say that tomorrow, when she reads the board. Say it nice and loud, that the numbers are the only thing that matters, and the best man should win." He picked up his thermos. "I've got a feeling you're going to get exactly the morning you've been asking for." And he walked to his 240,000-mile pickup and drove home to Ruth, while behind him the big screen in the glass palace glowed in the dark, holding a truth that 60 days had made too heavy for any watch, any lie, any expensive suit to lift. The last Friday of the month, Sterling Motors put out folding chairs and a catered breakfast, and the whole
Regional staff gathered under the big screen for the regional recognition. Brad Kessler wore a new suit. He told Tyler to save the seat up front. He told two customers to come watch me get my trophy.
Diane Marsh stood up with a microphone and a folder, and she did not look like a woman about to hand out a participation trophy. 60 days ago, she said, the new ownership group put every salesperson in this region on one honest board. Same cars, same customers, same clock. We did it because we believe something that this industry has spent a long time forgetting. She clicked a remote, and the leaderboard filled the 4-foot-tall screen. We believe the numbers, when you keep them honestly, tell the truth about who is actually good at this job. So let's let them talk. The room looked up, and the room went very quiet. At the top of the board, by a margin that made people lean forward to make sure they were reading it right, was a name in the biggest letters on the screen. Walter Doyle. Highest net sales in the store. And beside it, a customer satisfaction score, CSI, that read 100. Not an average of 100. Every single customer. A perfect column, 60 days deep. Brad Kessler's name was 4th. That can't be right, Brad said, standing up before he could stop himself, a nervous laugh cracking in the middle. The old man sells beaters off the corner lot. My deals are triple his ticket. That board's broken. The board isn't broken, Brad, Diane said calmly. But I'm glad you brought up your deals, because your name was 4th on sales. On satisfaction, you were last, in the entire region. And when we went to reconcile your numbers, we found something we need to discuss in front of everyone, since you spent 60 days telling everyone how it's done. She opened the folder, and what followed, the whole showroom would talk about for years. The morning the loudest man at Sterling Motors was taken apart, quietly, one true page at a time, by a woman who never once raised her voice. But Diane Marsh did the thing that made it land. She started not with Brad, but with the ones who'd propped him up, and worked her way to the top, exactly the way rot has to be cut out, from the edges in. First, Tyler, the duckling. 3 of your logged sales this month, Diane said, were customers our records show were actually worked and closed by other salespeople, then reassigned to you overnight from this terminal. She nodded at Rex's office. You've been handed deals to pad a favorite's stats. That stops today, and it goes in your file. Tyler sat down so fast he knocked over his coffee. He didn't look at Brad. Then Rex Dunphy, the floor manager. You control lead assignments and the used inventory system, Diane said. You assigned Mr. Doyle to the corner lot with the oldest, lowest commission stock in the store, which, for the record, makes his numbers more impressive, not less. But that's not the problem. She laid down a page. The problem is a disclosure note entered into our system on the 2nd of the month, flagging a vehicle as suspected flood salvage. It was deleted from your login 41 minutes later. We have the record of the deletion, and we have, she laid down a second page, a photograph of the original note, time-stamped, taken by the employee who wrote it, because apparently he's seen notes disappear before. Rex's face had gone the color of the pavement outside. You're suspended, pending termination, effective now. Security will walk you out. The room had stopped breathing. Brad was still standing, and the grin was gone. Which brings us to the car, Diane said. And now she turned fully to Brad, and the microphone wasn't even necessary anymore. A black coupe, sold 11 days ago to a young family with an infant. She set the salvage report beside it. It is a rebuilt flood total from a salvage auction 2 states away. You knew. The disclosure was in the system before it was deleted. A sound went through the crowd. Not a gasp, something uglier and more final. The sound of a room turning. You can't prove I knew, Brad started. Thus Marchetti detailed that car, Diane said. He saw the waterline. He reported it to Rex, verbally, in front of a witness, the week it arrived.
He's put it in writing this morning." In the back, Gus, in his clean coveralls, gave a small, steady nod. "And the family is safe, Brad, in case your conscience was going to ask, though I don't think it was. They're safe because the same senile old man you've been mocking picked up a phone on his own time, with nothing to gain, and told them not to drive it. He protected your customer from you. Sit down." Behind Diane, the big screen, the same one that had carried the leaderboard for 60 days, flickered and changed. It played a short, silent clip pulled from the detailing bay's own security camera, 3 months old, the timestamp glowing in the corner. A younger-looking Gus crouched inside the black coupe, peeling back the carpet, going still at the tide line he found underneath, then straightening to say something to someone off camera. No narration was necessary. 300 people understood at once that they were watching the exact moment the truth had first been seen and then buried. The same room that had walked past the corner lot for 60 days without a glance could not tear its eyes off that screen now.
Brad did not sit down. Brad did the thing that men like Brad do when the floor opens under them. He reached for the only tool he'd ever trusted. He pulled out his wallet, and with a shaking hand, he peeled out cash. And he actually said it in front of everyone. Okay, look, whatever this is, there's a number here, right? There's always a number. Put your money away. It was the first time Walter Doyle had spoken, and the whole room turned to the old man in the thrift store coat, standing quietly by the corner lot door where he'd stood all along. He walked forward, unhurried, the dog-eared notebook still in his hand. That's the only move you've got, isn't it, son? It's the only one you've ever had. He stopped in front of Brad. You met me 60 days ago, and you decided what I was worth by my coat. You spent 2 months certain that the watch and the suit and the noise were the job, and you never once noticed that not one of your customers ever came back, and every single one of mine did. He turned the notebook around so Brad could see it. Pages and pages of names, small, careful handwriting, a note beside each one. You want to know my secret? My whole system? Here it is. I write down what each person actually needs, and then I don't sell them anything else. That's it. That's the whole thing. It's free. It was always free. He closed the notebook. You could have had it any day for 60 days. You were too busy looking at their shoes. Brad's mouth worked. Who even are you? And here, this is the part that mattered. The part that made it different from every story where a secret king takes off his disguise. Walter didn't pull out a title or a badge or a deed because he didn't have one. He wasn't the owner. He wasn't rich. He wasn't anybody's secret boss. He was exactly what he'd appeared to be on that rainy first morning. An old man in a worn coat who needed a job. "I'm nobody, Brad," Walter said simply. "That's the part you can't survive. I've got no money, no power. I can't fire you." He nodded up at the screen, at the perfect column of hundreds, at his own name in letters 4 feet tall. "The only thing that beat you is up there. It's just the work. Done honestly, in front of a board that finally counted it. You didn't lose to a rich man in disguise." Diane Marsh stepped forward and finished it, because that part was hers to finish. "Brad Kessler, your employment is terminated for cause, falsifying a vehicle disclosure, fraud in the fleet accounts, and knowingly selling an unsafe vehicle. The disclosure fraud is going to the State Attorney General and the DMV this afternoon. That's not a company matter anymore. It's a legal one. The car is being recovered and the Delgados fully refunded and put into a genuinely clean vehicle at our cost, with an apology from me personally." She let that sit. "You spent 60 days telling this floor that this is a winner's business and the numbers are the only thing that matters." She gestured at the screen one last time. "For once, Brad, you were right. Look at the numbers. Security's waiting." Brad Kessler looked around the room for the audience that had laughed at all his jokes, and found Tyler staring at the floor, and found 40 co-workers who'd smiled at his cruelty for 3 years, now looking at him like he was something scraped off a shoe, and found not one single person willing to meet his eyes. He'd been the loudest man in every room for years,
and it turned out he'd been alone in all of them. The cash was still crumpled in his fist as they walked him out past the corner lot into the rain, where the bus he'd sneered at for 60 days hissed to a stop at the corner and pulled away without him. But a good ending isn't only about who walks out into the rain. It's about who finally gets walked in out of it.
Diane Marsh wasn't done, and she turned now to the young trainee standing off to the side, still not quite believing she was allowed to be there. "Nia Okafor," Diane said, "you are 3 weeks into this business. A manager you were terrified of told you, in writing, we found the draft, that he would end your career if you said a word about that car. And the record shows that at 11:14 that same morning, you pulled the history report anyway, and you saved it, and you didn't delete it. Because somewhere in you already knew what the job actually is." She smiled for the first time all morning. "We don't cut people like you. We build companies around them. Your trainee period is over as of today. You're a product specialist. With the corner lot if you want it, because it turns out that's the best desk in this store. And you'll be learning from him." She turned to Walter. "Mr. Doyle, I read your file this week. I also found your name in 3 chapters of the training manual this company still hands to every new hire. It's clear Rex Dunphy never bothered to read it, but I did. I spent my first year in this business studying a seminar you gave the year I started, and I have wanted to shake your hand for 15 years without knowing I'd ever get the chance." She did shake it, with both of hers. "I'm not going to insult you by making a speech. I'm going to make you an offer. Stay. Not on the corner lot, or on it, I truly do not care. You'll outsell this whole floor from a folding chair in the parking garage. Head of sales training for all 4 stores. Name your salary." And her voice softened because she'd read the whole file, the hospital statement included. "The benefits start the day you say yes. Not in 90 days, today." Walter Doyle was quiet for a moment. 60 days ago, he'd wanted exactly one thing: to get to 90 days and keep Ruth in her own bed by her own window. He'd walked in expecting to be small and to be tired and to endure. He hadn't expected to be seen. "I'll take the training job," he said at last, "on one condition. I keep a desk on the corner lot, and Nia works it with me. Best classroom in the building." He almost smiled. "And I'll need to leave by 4 most days. My wife likes the light in the garden in the afternoon, and I like to be there for it." "Done," said Diane Marsh. The showroom erupted. A whole floor of people who had watched cruelty win for 3 years, on their feet for a broke old man in a thrift store coat and a 23-year-old who'd found her spine in a hallway when she was most afraid. Gus the detailer was clapping with his whole arms. Somebody started the applause, and nobody wanted to be the one to stop it. In the weeks that followed, though the video only ever captures that one morning, the rest came true the way Walter had quietly promised it would. The Delgados got a genuinely clean car and a refund and drove their baby home safely. Rex and Brad's fleet fraud became a case number. The state pulled Brad's sales license over the flood car disclosure, which meant the one field he'd ever competed on, the winner's business he loved so much, was closed to him for good. And the corner lot, the crooked patch of cracked pavement where they sent cars and people to be forgotten, became, of all things, the place new hires asked to be assigned. Because that was where the old man taught them the free thing that turned out to be worth more than everything in the Glass Palace put together. Walter kept the notebook. He started a new one every 90 days. He never did let Rex buy him that coat. He didn't need a new one. The old one had turned out to be plenty warm. Brad Kessler had the watch, the suit, the plaque, and the loudest voice in every room. Walter Doyle had a worn coat, a flip phone, a dog-eared notebook, and a habit of telling the truth to people who couldn't do a thing for him. When the board finally counted honestly, only one of them was still standing on the floor, and it wasn't the one with the expensive wrist. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. If you walked onto that lot in an old coat, who would sell you a car? The loud one or the honest one? And be truthful, because we've all been Brad at the espresso bar at least once, sizing somebody up by their shoes. Tell me below. If you believe skill and decency should still be able to beat noise and money, hit subscribe and stay for the next one. The Waitress, a table of executives humiliated over a spilled drink who turned out to be the only person in the room who could save their company. You won't believe how that one ends.